Mzansi, you are listening to Farmers Inside Track, proudly brought to you by Food for Mzansi. Officially, this is the world's best podcast for 2024, as awarded by One IFRA. Of course, that's the global organization for the world's press. I'm your host, Duncan Masiwa, and welcome to episode 458, powered by CropLife South Africa. Now, in this episode, we delve into the phase out of hazardous agricultural chemicals, specifically those classified under CMR 1A and 1B categories, which are known for their potential cause of cancer, genetic mutations, and reproductive harm. In this episode, we chat to Roleen la Grange, Regulatory Manager at CropLife South Africa, and Chana-Lee White, agri-intel Manager, to uncover the details of these regulatory changes. We also discover how the new regulations will impact South African farming practices, the process for seeking exemptions, and the alignment with international standards. We also learn about the distinction between CMR 1A and 1B categories, implications of the phase-out on agricultural remedies, and the path forward for farmers and the industry. That, of course, and much more. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Duncan. It's a pleasure to be here today.
I want to go straight into the conversation. We're speaking about something that's quite technical, and if I'm honest, I have no idea what we're talking about today, but that's why you are here to take us through it. Let's start with you, Roleen. What is a CMR? Let's maybe start the conversation there, Roleen.
Thanks, Duncan. So what is a CMR is quite a complex question for which a bit of background will be necessary. So to start, agricultural remedies are regulated under the Fertilizer, Farm Feeds, Agricultural Remedies and Stock Remedies Act, which is also referred to as Act number 36 of 1947. So the most recent regulations promulgated under this act is called the Regulations Relating to Agricultural Remedies, which was published on 25 August 2023. This regulation defines what we refer to as substances of concern, and it means any substance which has an inherent capacity to cause an adverse effect on humans, animals, or the environment, and is present or is produced in an agricultural remedy in sufficient concentration to present risks of such an effect. So such substances are then further defined in the annexure of the regulations, in which 5 criteria are provided that could result in the remedy being classified as a substance of concern. So these criteria is as follows: agricultural remedies that meet the criteria of carcinogenicity, mutagenicity, or reproductive toxicity, categories 1A or 1B of the GHS. In other words, they have the capacity to cause cancer, induce certain mutations, or could adversely affect fertility or the unborn child. And then also active ingredients listed in the Stockholm Convention, which is a convention that regulates persistent organic pollutants. And then also active ingredients listed in the Montreal Protocol, which regulates chemicals that deplete the ozone layer. So when we refer to CMRs, we are referring to the first 3 criteria for substances of concern. And this is then C for carcinogenicity, M for mutagenicity, and the R is for reproductive toxicity. And this classification, as we mentioned, is according to GHS, which we'll get to now. So seeing as agricultural remedies would predominantly be classified as substances of concern due to these 3 criteria, and not really the Montreal Protocol or Stockholm Convention, these are the most criteria for consideration. So to make sense of this information, you also need to understand what we are saying when we are referring to GHS categories 1A or 1B. So the GHS stands for the Globally Harmonized System of Classification and Labeling of Chemicals, which, as it states, is a standardized system for classifying and labeling chemicals published by the United Nations. This classification and labeling system became mandatory in South Africa for all hazardous chemicals with the promulgation of the Regulations for Hazardous Chemical Agents published under the Occupational Health and Safety Act in March 2021. So according to this classification system, there are various hazard classes which define the type of hazard. For example, in this instance, carcinogenicity, mutagenicity, and reproductive toxicity are the hazard classes. And these hazard classes are then attributed a category which gives an indication of the severity of the hazard. So category 1 would be the most severe, with category 2 being less severe, and so forth. So in terms of the CMR characteristics specifically, category 1A would be known to have carcinogenic, mutagenic, or reproductive toxic potential for humans, and placing the substance in this category is largely based on human evidence, whereas category 1B would be presumed to have carcinogenic, mutagenic, or reproductive toxicity potential for humans, and placing the substance in this category is largely based on animal evidence. So after all this, in summary, CMRs are substances that have known or presumed potential to cause cancer, genetic mutations, or affect human reproduction.
It's definitely a lot to take in, and I appreciate you going through it. Chana, Roleen just took us through what is a CMR and all the different classifications and categories. But what does the regulation state about these substances of concern, Chana?
Thanks, Duncan. So in terms of the substance of concern, the regulations state that the registrar may not grant a registration of an agricultural remedy that is classified as a substance of concern after the 1st of June 2024. The registrar may also not renew the registrations of the remedies that are classified as a substance of concern after this date. And also it states that the registrar must prioritize the review and registration of suitable alternative solutions to replace these substances of concern where replacements are available. And in cases where there are no suitable alternatives, a clause in the regulation allows the registrar to approve substance of concern in exceptional circumstances for a specific period and restricted use. So this exemption to the law is referred to as what we call a derogation.
And I would suppose that many of these regulations are aligned with what's happening elsewhere in the world. In this case, is it aligned with what other countries are doing?
Yes, Duncan. So basically what South Africa is doing is very much aligned with what is being done internationally. As a matter of fact, our regulations are likely based on the EU regulations. So the EU regulation, which is called the Concerning the Making Available on the Market and Use of Biocidal Products, which was published in 2012, states that active substances classified as category 1A or 1B carcinogens, mutagens, or reproductive toxins may not be approved for use in the EU. However, they have a clause in their regulations, just like we do, to allow for derogations, and the derogation criteria is almost identical to what is stipulated in our regulations.
It's quite interesting to me, Roleen, going back to you. If these substances are of concern, then why would there be an option to apply for derogation?
Duncan, that is a very important question. To answer this question, we first need to look at the difference between a risk and a hazard. So the degree of a chemical's capacity to harm depends on its intrinsic properties, such as its capacity to interfere with normal biological processes, its capacity to burn or explode or corrode, etc. The concept of risk, or the likelihood of harm occurring, however, is only introduced when exposure is considered in conjunction with the data regarding potential hazards. So in order to determine the risk or the likelihood of harm occurring, both the hazard and the exposure must be considered. And if you can minimize either the hazard or exposure, you minimize the risk or the likelihood of harm occurring. So the GHS classification system that we referred to previously provides information on the hazards associated with the chemical, but it does not provide information on the actual risk or the likelihood of harm occurring when using the chemical. So if we think, for example, of a vehicle, it can also be considered a hazard if we consider the number of accidents on the road, but we don't just ban vehicles altogether because of this. A vehicle that's not moving would likely not pose any risk of an accident. And when using a vehicle, we adhere to the speed limits, we wear a safety belt, and we adhere to other road safety regulations to reduce the risk of harm occurring. So similarly with chemicals, we reduce exposure in many ways in order to mitigate the risks. As Paracelsus, a Swiss physician and chemist, stated, all things are poisoned and nothing is without a poison. And essentially, it's only the dose that makes the poison. And this is essentially what it comes down to. So in order to provide a bit of context, let's consider a few everyday products with exactly the same hazard classification as these remedies that we are referring to today. If we think of vitamin A, for example, which is made up of retinol and retinaldehyde, Vitamin A is classified as a reproductive toxin category 1B. However, it's also a vitamin and it's essential for several biological processes, and it's even used in skincare products that we apply daily all over our bodies. Another example is estrogen, which is a hormone we produce naturally and is used by many women as a contraceptive. Estrogen is classified as a carcinogen category 1B and also reproductive toxin category 1B. Many products used as rodenticides are anticoagulants and classified as reproductive toxin category 1A. These same chemicals are also used medically as blood thinners for patients at risk of blood clots. So you can see that looking only at the hazards associated with the chemical will likely drive you crazy, and we would be scared of using any product on the market, from vitamins to medication to skincare products. So it's very important to consider the risks in conjunction with the hazard. And then another point that is important to understand when looking at the legislation around CMR products is that it follows what we call the precautionary principle. And the precautionary principle essentially enables decision makers to adopt precautionary measures when scientific evidence about an environmental or human health hazard is uncertain and the stakes are high. So one of the most controversial elements of the principle is the shift of the burden of proof. So where traditionally the person claiming that an activity could cause harm should produce proof to back up that claim, the precautionary principle reverses the burden of proof, and the individual or the entity proposing the activity must prove the activity is not harmful.
So there's then a difference between the inherent dangers of a chemical and the actual risk of a harm when using it. I think that's quite clear in your response there.
Correct.
Thank you so much. Shana, going back to you, what is then the process of derogation in South Africa?
According to the regulations, applicants may apply for a derogation in exceptional circumstances where there are no suitable alternatives in any of the following. So the risk to humans, animals, or the environment from exposure to an active substance in an agricultural remedy under realistic worst-case conditions of use is negligible. There is also evidence that the active substance is essential to prevent or control a serious danger to the human health, animal health, or the environment. Or not approving the active substance would have a disproportionate negative impact on society when compared with the risk to human health, animal health, or the environment arising from the use of that substance. So in such cases, the registrar may approve a remedy for a specific period and for restricted uses, and only after the applicant has conducted a risk assessment and made that available for public comment. So important to note about the derogation process is that applicants may only apply for derogations for specific uses that comply with the derogation requirements provided in the regulations. Such a derogation will be trade name specific and therefore not a blanket approval for all agricultural remedies with the same active ingredient, or even all uses included on the original agricultural remedy label. Only those products and uses for which a risk assessment has been conducted can be considered. And in addition, derogation is not guaranteed. The registrar will consider all available information available to decide on whether a remedy may be kept on the market for a specific use and for a specified period or not.
Shana, I suppose that understanding the current status and potential outcomes of these products is important for several reasons. And, we could go into that. Where are we now in the process, and what will happen with these products?
So for remedies that have been classified as a substance of concern, there are three possible outcomes. So agricultural remedies may be discontinued, and this will occur if registration holders do not apply for derogation of these agricultural remedies. As mentioned, the registrations of these products cannot be renewed after the 1st of June 2024, and therefore these remedies will be phased out. Secondly, if the classification of the remedy as a substance of concern is due to a co-formulant and not the active ingredient in the mixture, applicants may opt to amend their formulations and replace that co-formulant with a suitable alternative. If the co-formulant can be substituted with an alternative, the agricultural remedy can stay on the market and will no longer be classified as a substance of concern. If coformulants cannot be substituted, the remedy will likely be phased out. And lastly, the other option is that a remedy may stay on the market due to the applicant applying for a derogation, but derogations, as explained earlier, will only be for a specific agricultural remedy and for specific uses and approved for a specific period, and will only be considered after conducting the risk assessment and making it available for public comment. And the outcome will be dependent on the decision of the registrar ultimately. So, as mentioned before, this procedure is very much aligned to what is happening internationally.
Thank you, Roleen la Grange, Regulatory Manager at CropLife South Africa, and Chana-Lee White, agri-intel Manager. You can, of course, read more on this topic by visiting www.foodformzansi.co.za. And that's a wrap. Remember to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform so you never miss any of the episodes. From me, Duncan Masiwa, our technical producer, Megan Fundiff, and the rest of #Team Food for Mzansi, thanks for listening.